Today we will be going ahead with the topics like the user creation, the privilege grant, role creation, and assigning the roles to user. We have gone through the theoretical topic yesterday. We'll just have a quick practical presentation of that. Okay. So let me first create a user. So I have connected the database using the super user privilege, that is a sysdba. Now I'll issue a command create user worksheet identified by worksheet. Okay, so it looks like there is already a user there. So let's create another user. Create user test identified by Oracle. So okay, we have created a user called test1. So when a user is being created, certain things are coming as default. As in the first class, I explained between the difference between the operating system authentication and the database authentication. So when a user is being created, an entry is made to a table called db_users. So describe db_users. See, there are certain important information for us. One is that in this view, we can see the username and then the user ID, that is unique identification number. Password is nothing but the encrypted password of the user. And then you can see the account status, the lock date, expiry date, default tablespace, temporary tablespace, created, profile, etc. A lot of information are there on this particular view. Okay, so we need to, many of times during the user administration, we have to use this view to identify the status of the user. So for example, select created, status, default tablespace, temporary tablespace from dba_users, where username equal to test1. Remember, the values for the data dictionary we are giving on capital letter. So it is account status. Okay, now you can see that the user is being created on the 17th May and the account status is open. That means the user is allowed to connect to the database's account is not locked. And default tablespace. Default tablespace means whenever the user is being created or whenever the database is created using DBCA, a specific tablespace is being assigned as the default tablespace for the database. So while creating the user, you have an option of specifying the default tablespace as well as the default temporary tablespace for that user. But if you are not specifying the default permanent tablespace and the default temporary tablespace, whatever the values at the database level, that values will be assigned for that user. Okay. So how do you understand that what is the default permanent tablespace and the default temporary tablespace for the database? For that, we need to describe another data dictionary view, that is database_properties. Okay. Here, we'll format the columns called property underscore value format A14. Set line size 118. Select property underscore name. Okay, now if you're looking, you can see that the two values, they are default permanent permanent table space for the database's usage and the default temporary table space system. So which means when you are creating the user, you have if you are omitting the keywords like default table space and default temporary table space, whatever the values at the database level, that values will be assigned to that user. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so an assignment for you guys will be that you have to find out how the default table space and default temporary table space for the database can be changed. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you're looking, going back to our previous query, where in which we have selected the database information or the user information. So default table space become users because it is taken from at the database level. Default temporary table space will become temp, that is again taken from the database level values. So here one of the important thing is that account status is equal to open. So that means the user is able to connect to the database. Now let's open another terminal so that we can do a connectivity test. Okay, I will log in as, so we have created a user called test1, so let me log in as test1. Okay, so here first attempt what I'm doing is that I'm trying to connect to the database with a username, with a wrong username and password. So for the test1 user, the password what we did or what we created was Oracle. So when I'm giving SQL plus test1/test1, it clearly and it gives me an error message that invalid username and password, which indicates database is trying for an authentication, but database is matching with the username and password available on the database dictionary, and it says that this is not matching. Is that clear? Now let's say what will happen when you are logging with the correct password. Okay, now you are getting an error message that the user has been authenticated because it's not telling that the wrong username or password. But it says that if you wanted to enter into the database, you need to have certain privileges which is missing here. So create session privilege, which is required for a user to connect to the database, is not available, and because of that user's logon is denied. Is that clear? Any questions? Okay. Now we will go back to the other window as a super user window, and we will grant the create session privilege to that user. Grant create session to test1. The privileges are granted. Now let's go back and again do the same thing. The user is now able to connect. Okay. Now let's see whether the user is able to create some table or not. Create table, my tab, name, varchar, 2 of 100. It says that insufficient privilege. So when you are trying to create a table, or when that particular user is trying to create a table, he don't have the privilege to create the table. So now, as a super user, you are going to grant certain other privilege. Grant, create session, create table, 2, just 1. Now let's try whether he is able to create it. Now you are getting another message that insufficient privilege on the tablespace usage, which means the user is not able to, or the user is not able to create something on the user's tablespace because he has not given the privilege on that particular tablespace. Okay, now remember we are not getting the error that he don't have the privilege to create a table. That error gone, but he don't have a privilege to do something on the user's tablespace. Now we'll change that permission as well. Alter user quota unlimited on. Okay, I issue the command alter user test1 quota unlimited on usage. Usage is a table space. Now let's go back and try whether he is able to create or not. The table got created. So in your real-time issues, you may be getting a request like, what is the user, like if they wanted to create a user, the application team wanted to create a user and grant the required privilege. But one of the simplest or one of the thumb rule in user management is that, say the privileges given to the user should be the minimum. Many a times you may be getting the privilege request like create a database role, like grant the DBA role and all. As a DBA, it's very easy for you to give the privileges. But at the same time, it is your responsibility that you are making the security of the database tighter. So one of the items for the security of the database is that your the privileges, whatever you are granting to the user, should be of minimum, or it is also known as the least privilege concept. What is a least privilege can be granted or should be granted for that user to make his activities successful. So for that, now we are going to understand that how to create a role and how to grant the role for that user, because it will be very easy for you to manage the privileges with the help of the role. Any questions on this topic? Okay, just a second. Okay, so now we do have the privilege to, or the user is having privilege. So what we will do that we will create a role or grant the roles to the privilege. Before that, let's try to find out what are the privileges that is available at the database level. What are the system level privileges are there? So select. As I explained in the yesterday's class, the system level privileges are available on a data dictionary view, db_sys_privis. So describe this particular view, describe db_sys_privis. Describe db_sys_privis. Okay, here I must show user. I must test one. I don't have the privilege to query that data dictionary view. So I need to come back to the sys user and query the table db_sys_privis. So here you can see that grantee, privilege and admin option. So select distinct or select start from db_sys_privis where grantee equal to test1. Okay. Grantee means to whom the privileges are granted. So who will be granting the privileges? Only the privilege can be always granted by the super user. Okay, now you are seeing one more thing. There is something like admin option. So what does it admin option mean? Say a user who is granted with that privilege, okay, he cannot grant the privilege to somebody else. For example, here we have granted the create session and create table privilege to test1. Now let's try the test1 granting that privilege to somebody else. Grant create session to Vaishid1 or Vaishid user. You are getting that insufficient privilege. Because, see, Oracle is making sure that the privileges are always granted correctly. But there can be a situation where in which you may have wanted to delegate some of your activities to some other user. Say, for example, you are working as a senior DBA and you wanted to have your junior to administrator or do certain activities. So what you can do is that you can find out which are the privileges which you wanted to delegate. Then grant that privilege with admin option. Okay. So now let's see what I'm going to do is then grant create session to test1 with admin option. Now select star from. Now you can say create session is with admin option. Okay. Now let's go back and execute the same command. Now the test user, show user, test1 is able to grant the privileges assigned to or the grant the privileges assigned with him with admin option, and he can grant to somebody else. Is that clear?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, let's say these test1 users. So we saw that these are the privileges granted to the user. That the privileges granted at the database level is known as the or can be obtained from db_sys_privis. So obviously a question can come: what are the privileges? What are the privileges what are the system level privileges available? Okay. So you can get a simple query to find out the privileges that is available on a version. You can issue select distinct privilege from db underscore sys underscore privs. So you can say almost 161 privileges are there. So certain times from the practical point of view, certain times you may be getting some requests like I want the DBA privilege, super user privilege. When you ask him why you want that one, they may tell that say I'm an application developer or some people are working under me. So I wanted to know what are the view, the details about the view they created or the activities they are doing. So that means the user has a certain privilege, certain requirement is there, but that doesn't require a super user privilege. So you need to understand that what is this privilege used for? What is the use of this privilege? Okay. So let me select name from. That information. Okay, if I'm not wrong, there is some places that what is that privilege meant for and what is used for, it is there, but I'm not remembering that view. But down the line, as and when you are practicing more, it is very easy for you to remember. Say, for example, you wanted to create a user. We wanted to give a privilege to create a user. So you can, from this itself, you can say that what is that privilege to be granted? Create user, or become a user, alter user. Like that, what are the different privileges that is required for doing your day-to-day tasks? Definitely you will be able to know by practice, but I'll see whether is there any documentation which states that what is that privilege and what is the use of that privilege. I do remember that it was somewhere in the database itself, but I just forgot that actually. But I will get to you. Okay, so db underscore sys underscore privs is a view where in which you will be able to understand that you can understand what are the system level privileges granted for that user. Again, granted for that user means it can be a user that you created at the database level, or it can be a role which you created at the database level. A privilege can be granted not only for the user but also for the role as well. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, let's say the user is test 1, right? Now, let's see, is there any table level privilege for this particular user? Describe. The table level privileges are from db underscore tab underscore privs. Tab underscore privs. So, select star from db underscore tab underscore privs, where grantee means to whom the privilege is granted, equal to test 1. There is no row selector because we have not granted any table level or object level privilege to test 1. Now what we will do then? The test 1, let's have the test 1 create a table. He already created a table. Let him grant certain object level privilege to the user. Okay. So let me go back and grant select. See how the see how we are granting the object level privilege. Grant select. What is the privilege? Select privilege on my tab to worship. Okay. So here grant is a keyword. Select is the privilege on which object to which user. Object level, system level privilege was grant the privilege to the user. Here, privilege on which object to which user. That's how the syntax comes. Is it clear? Are you understanding?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the same thing we can find out from the DBA tab privilege. Select star from DB underscore tab underscore prerequisites where grantee equal to Vaishit. Because we have granted the privilege to Vaishit user. Okay. Now we are getting complete information. The grant is Vaishit and the privileges was who granted the privilege. Grantor is just one. So that way we can find out that why that information is helpful is that if you create a user with a certain privilege like select any table. Because that's a more advanced privilege where which the user can select the records on any user's table. So if a user is granted to select any table with the admin option, then he can grant the selective privilege on a table to some other user. So by looking at the grantor column, we will be able to understand that to which user or to which user, by which user the privileges are granted. Okay, so here you can set the privilege select is granted to test1 to Vaishit user on the table my tab whose honor is test1 by the user test1. Is that clear? And here you can see that the grantable, there is a column called grantable equal to no, which means the Vaishit user don't have a privilege to grant that privilege to somebody else, like the admin privilege in the case of system level privileges. Okay. Now we can see that how we can revoke the privilege. So object level privilege can be revoked in the at the object level. Revoke select on my tab from worship. So the privilege is revoked. The same way we can revoke the system level privileges one. Revoke create table from test1. So the system level privileges, or whenever you are granting the privileges directly, that is without the help of a role. So here you granted the privilege directly, like grant to the user you granted directly. But whenever you are whenever you are granting the privilege directly to the user, that privilege will be in effect automatically or immediately. Okay, but when you grant the privilege to a user or when you revoke the privilege from a user with the help of a role, that will take place only after from the next logon of that user. Is that clear? Okay. Now we have revoked the create table from the test1 user. Now let's go back and try whether he is able to create it. Create table, new tab, name varchar 2 of 100. insufficient privileges. Because the system level privilege or the privileges which is granted directly to the user is taking place immediately. Now, what we'll do then? We will create a role, and then we assign that role, assign the privileges to the role, and then assign that role to the user. Okay. So create create role, dev role. Okay, that's it. Grant, create table to dev role. Grant dev role to test one. Now we are on test one, and let's try to create still we are getting the insufficient privilege. Exit from here. Again, test one / Oracle. Let's try to create the table. The table got created. The same way, I'm just again revoke, create table from the row. So let's try what happens if it's trying to create a table. Insufficient privilege. So which means when you are revoking something which will be immediately in effect, okay, but when you are granting some new privileges with the help of the role, it will be in effect only after from the next logon onwards. Is that clear?
Right. Can you repeat this?
So when you granted the privilege with the help of the role, the privilege was available only from the next logon only. You got me?
Yes.
But when you revoke the privilege, it was you revoked the privilege from the role only. But it was effective. It was in effect immediately itself. You got me? Say here revoke create table from the role, and I just executed it says an insufficient privilege. But when I did the same exercise with the granted the privileges, it didn't granted the privilege immediately to the user, but the user got the privilege only after from the log off and login. Make sense? Yeah. Any questions on this topic?
No, sir.
Okay.
What about the admin option? If we have granted some privileges with the admin option, so will it remove from the other hierarchy as well?
Yeah, it will be removed.
I mean, throughout the hierarchy it will remove, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, just one second. Certain additional information about the roles. Okay, so I'll take that as a separate topic now. I'll stop this recording and then I'll start it again.
Okay.
Yeah, before me disconnecting, do you have any other questions? Okay, you are asking something about the hierarchy as well, right? So let's see how that hierarchy is working. Okay. Now for that test to be done, we will create two users basically. Okay, we have already have the test one user is there. We will grant create a user called test2. Okay. So we have a user called test1 and we have a user called test2. Fine. Now, we have granted the create session. We'll see what are the privileges granted to that particular user called test. So select star from db underscore sys underscore pribs, where grantee equal to test1. Okay. So create session and privilege is granted with the admin option. Fine. Now we'll connect as a test1 user, show user test1, show user it is test1. Now grant create session to test2. Fine. Now let's open another terminal. su-orcon or env rack db1. Fine. SQL plus test2/orcon is able to connect. So the privilege is granted. Now then a question is that let's revoke that privilege and see. There are two things. Let's say maybe we may be revoking or we may be dropping as well, right? So let's try to revoke the privilege and see what happens. Revoke, create session from test1. The privilege is revoked. Now let's exit from here and see whether he is able to connect. So the user test2 still able to connect, which means once the privilege is granted from a user to another user, that privilege will work as an independent activity. So once the privilege is granted to a user with the admin option, and once that a user is granted that privilege to somebody, it is not going to get cascaded further. Cascaded in the sense the revoke will not get cascaded. So we have revoked the privilege from the first user, but still the second user has the privilege because system level privileges are granted in as a explicit activity. Is that clear?
Okay. So there is no option for cascading for the revoke?
No, there is no option to cascade the revoke.
Okay. So we have to individually revoke.
Yeah, we have to individually revoke it. Because what happens is that, say it is just like something, right? Say, now, let's take an analogy of situation. Say, for example, as I say, I'm taking the same example like what we are looking as you are a senior DB and you have some other DB to handle your work. So you granted certain privileges to that user. Like say, now Vimal is your junior DBA. So you granted certain privilege to Vimal and Vimal has granted that privilege to some other user. Now there can be a situation that Vimal is leaving the organization. Right? So if all that privilege get revoked, then it will be a serious job for you. You got me? Does it make sense?
Yes.
So because of that, the system level privileges make sure that once you are granted, then that you have granted or you are delegated that privilege to some other user. Now, if you are if you are dropping or revoking that user or that privilege from that user, then that privileges are not revoked from the other user. So you must expressly revoke from the user whomever you want.
And the same thing will apply for the object level privilege as well?
Object level privileges, say, again it's a tricky situation. For example, if the base user is dropped, then the privilege will not be available. Let me say, you have a user called, test1. in the test one you are created a table. Now test one is granting the privileges to grant the select on that privilege to some other user. So as long as the test one, the object owner is available, then it's fine. Okay. But as in the example of the system level privilege, say you granted a privilege to X user with admin option. That X user is granted to some other user even though the select statement is then the dropping of the user or revoking the privilege from the X user is not going to affect the other user. Is that clear?
Yes.
Okay. Now just a small understanding about the three important system level roles. Okay. One is a sysdba, second is a sysopper, and the other one is sysasm. So sysdba is the super user of the database who can create the database, who can drop the database, who can do anything with the database. Sysasm is a super user for the specific type of instance called ASM instance. Fine. And sysopper is a less powerful user which is used for starting the database, shutting down the databases, and recovering the database. But if you don't have the privileges like changing the database from the archelog mode to non-archelog mode or creating a new database extra, that option is not there.
Okay. DBA is also another kind of role.
DB is also another kind of role, yes.
What is the difference between DBA and the DBA role?
SysDB is a super user privilege. Or super user privilege. Before that, super user privilege. Say, for example, there should be certain privileges to create a database. Say, once you install the software, you don't have the database. So somebody should have a privilege to create the database itself. So sysdba is granted, as I explained earlier, sysdba is granted at the operating system level. It's granted to the groups who belong, members who belong to that particular group. Okay, you can explicitly grant to a certain user also, but at that time also we have seen that when you are assigning that sysdba to some other user, then he logs always with the username only. We have tested in the first class, right? I mean, the first class. So always the members of the owner group will have the privilege of creating the database, dropping the database extra. DBA role is only for managing the database. Say for example, say select privilege from DB underscore sys underscore privs, where grantee equal to DBA. So almost 160 privileges are granted to the DBA role. Okay. So DBA role got the privilege like dropping the user, creating the table space, dropping the table space, like a lot of privileges are gone. But he don't have a privilege to create a database or drop a database, shut down and start up the database. That kind of privileges are not there for DBA role. Is that clear? Okay. Now there is a change on the statement. Hello? Are you guys able to hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Now there is a small change on the or the correction on the statement what I did. I was just going through the document thoroughly. So it says that the admin level options, that is system level privileges, are not cascaded. Revoking is not cascaded, but the grant privileges, with the grant option, that means when you are granting, the grant option is used for the tab level privileges. So that privileges are cascaded. So we'll do with a test actually. So we have confirmed that the privileges granted with the admin option, the revoking of the privileges granted with the admin options are not cascaded, or in simple words, the system level privileges, revoking of the system level privileges are not cascaded. But the document says that the revoking of the object level privileges are cascading. So we'll do a test and we'll find out that. Okay, now I'll grant create session, comma, create table to test one. Okay, and we will create a new user as well. Create user test 3 identified by Oracle. So we have one user called test1, whom we have granted a create session and create a table, and then we have created the test2 and test3 users. There are 3 users, totally 3 users. Now let's connect as the test user. Show parameter, show user. Okay. Now grant select on new tab to test2 with grant option. Privilege is granted. Okay. Akshay, would you mind please to mute? Select star from db underscore tab underscore privs, where grantee equal to test2. Okay. You can see that for the test2, the select on the new tab is granted with the grant option. So now we will connect as, so we are already connected as test2 user. We'll just exit and connect again. Okay. Now grant select on test1 dot my new tab to test3. He is able to grant because the original privilege, select privilege was granted him, was granted him with the grant option. So he is able to cascade that privilege to some other user. Now we will see the revoke option. So revoke select on new tab to from test2. The privilege is revoked. Now let's here select star from test1 dot new tab. The table or view does not exist, which indicates that when the object level privileges was revoked from a user, then the revoke is cascaded to other users whom the second user has granted the privilege. Make sense?
It means the object level privileges revoking is
cascaded, and the system level privilege revoking is not cascaded. I was initially wrong. I was just going through, apparently I was taking the class, I was just going through some documentation. So it was mentioned there.
Okay.
Any other questions here? Okay.
Yes, regarding that sysdba and the dba roles.
Yeah.
So, sysdba is a role, right?
Sysdba
is a privilege.
Yeah, sysdba is a role only. But it is not considered as a normal role what you create the database. It's something called a built-in role. I mean, say you can work a database without a DBA role also. You got me? You can revoke all the roles that is available on them, but sysdba, syshopper and sysasm are actually configured to the operating system roles actually. See, when you install Oracle software, okay, so you will be telling that who is the owner of that software group. So that is being connected to an operating system role known as OSDBA. Okay, so during the time of the installation, it will be asking you what is your OS or DBA group and what is your OS Opera group. So OSDB and OS Opera are a kind of groups which is created at the operating system level, and then the members are being mapped to. So OSDB is a keyword that is used by Oracle during the installation. So when you are telling that the OSDB group is equal to DBA, so all the members of that group are being granted with the sysdba privilege built in, or sysdba role built in. Okay, so you cannot say that is a, you can say that it's a, sysdba is a system level privilege, rather role, it's a system level privileges, but you cannot manage that system level privilege just like how you are managing the normal privilege. You can grant the system sysdba to some other user, but at the time he becomes a super user. So it's different than how you are normally managing the privileges. Is that clear? So to answer, to precisely to your question, is it a role or privilege? It's a privilege only. But that privilege is mapped with the OSDBA privilege which is getting created during the time of installation.
So through this SQL prompt, we can grant the sysdba privilege to any user, right?
Any user. But at that time, yeah, that user, internally he becomes a sys user actually. That we have tested in the previous class.
No, I think I got confused. If we grant sysdba privilege to any user, that user becomes the super user, right?
Yeah, that user becomes the super user.
But that user will not necessarily be the part of the install group.
No need not be. See, that's why I'm telling that you are not understanding that concept here. See, OS install group is at the operating system level. Say, for example, there is no, say, now I'm going back to my operating system. Okay. cat/etc/password pipe grep-i test. There is no OS user called test here, right? Now, but here I can grant sysdba to test1. You got me?
Okay.
Here I have granted that sysdba privilege to a database user. So any member of the OSDBA group will by default will become at the operating system level. Any operating system, or to tell in the right way, any operating system user who is a member of the installation group will be able to connect it to the database using the sysdba privilege. But at that time, whatever the username is there, he will be always connected as the sys user only. You got me? Say, but now, say, let's see here, test1/Oracle as sysdba. Show user. Here also, he is connecting, even though test1 is Oracle as sysdba, he is getting connected to the here. This is not really matching with the example which we decided. So here also, in the previous class I told you, whenever the owner or the member of the user connects from the database directly or from the server directly, whatever the username he connects, he will just connect it to the sys user only. Because he is a member of the group who installed the software.
Right. So
Okay.
if we do not switch to the Oracle user and if we switch to the any other user and then we connect to the test one / Oracle as sysdba.
At that time he will be, how we can do it, there is something called $pw file underscore usage. Okay. Describe $pw file underscore usage. One second. Select rename tab. Okay. Select star from. Here you can see that there is a user test1 who is also granted with the sysdba privilege. So, pw file underscore users are telling you that who are the user who granted with the sysdba privilege. So, first point we noted, any user who directly connecting from the operating system, who is a member, any operating system user who are member of the installation group and he just connects to the database using the sysdba privilege. Then he connects to the database as sys user only.
Right.
Right. Now to connect it to test this, we will try to connect in a different way. Let's try to do TNS ping rack db1. Okay. Now SQL plus test1 / Oracle @rack db1 as sysdba. So yeah. Here also the second test. Here we are connecting to the database. Here just wanted to make you understand on certain one more thing. Okay. Did you see this example?
Yes.
Okay. Here I am connecting to the database equivalent like remote connectivity. Okay. So test1 user, we know that one, that is that he is granted with the sysdba privilege and he is having the password as Oracle. Okay. But in the previous example, and now what happens is that say when you are connected, issue the command SQL plus some usernames test1 / Oracle1 @rack db1 as sysdba. Okay. So when you granted a wrong password, Oracle has prevented his login telling that he is connecting with the wrong password. But when we tried the same example from the operating system directly, we didn't get this error. Right? To make it clear, like say SQL plus Oracle1 as sysdba. It allowed to connect. It didn't do any password checking. But when we tried to connect remotely, Oracle did the password checking. And it says that it's an invalid username and password. But in all the cases, once the user is successfully connected to the database, irrespective of what is the username he is giving, he will be always represented as sys user only or the super user. Because database doesn't support or cannot have more than one super user, because many of the data dictionary tables, many of the objects, etc., are owned by the sys user. So that cannot be revoked. Or that sysdba role is sysdba privileges is very much important for the database administrator. Day-to-day base, every second administration is very much important. So you can grant different user with the sysdba privilege. So when they are connecting remotely, they will be validated with the password you granted to them. But once the password is validated, once they connect, they take the username as sys only. No, not individual username. Is that clear?
Okay, got it.
Yeah. Anytime, in nutshell, any successful connection as sysdba will always get the username as sysuser, whether he connects locally or whether he connects remotely. And when it's connected locally, there is no password authentication are there. When he connects remotely, password authentication will be there. But once successful authentication is taken place, it will be always the sysuser. And the reason for that one is that sysuser is the owner of the data dictionary. So you cannot have more than one person who is the owner of the data dictionary.
Okay.
Is that clear?
Yeah.
Any other question? I thought of finishing it off the roles also today, but I don't think it will take place. No problem.